Georgia's toughest lockdowns, the untold stories from Reedsville prison. If you think you've heard every dark story buried behind America's toughest prison walls, think again. And before we dive into this one, make sure you're locked in, subscribe, like, and comment, because once you hear what happened in Reedsville, you'll never look at a maximum security prison the same way again. For decades, Georgia State Prison, known simply as Reedsville, lived in the shadows of the state's criminal justice system. Built like an aging fortress and tucked deep into rural Georgia, the institution was infamous long before investigators uncovered a chain of unsettling events that would force the prison into its longest, most controversial lockdown. It began with a single discovery, something that should never have happened inside a place designed to control every second of every inmate's life. On a humid summer morning, Deputy Warden Marcus Hensley was making his routine walk through E Block, the oldest and most restrictive wing in the facility. E Block housed inmates who required constant observation, men who had tested the limits of prison security more than once. Officers noticed that cell 3 to 14, assigned to an inmate named Derek Calloway, remained unusually quiet. Calloway wasn't known for silence. He'd spent 10 years inside Reedsville, 5 of them in E Block, and had a reputation for being alert, sharp, always watching. But that morning, he wasn't at the small metal table. He wasn't pacing the cell. He wasn't anywhere in sight. The first assumption was medical distress. Officers called his name, tapped the bars, even shined flashlights inside. Then the deputy warden unlocked the door, and what they found didn't make sense. The cell was empty. No sign of forced exit. No sign of anyone assisting him. The air felt still, like something had been removed, not escaped. Reedsville had experienced its challenges over the years, but a missing inmate from the highest security wing? That was unheard of. Cameras from the corridor showed nothing unusual. No movement. No tampering. Calloway simply wasn't there. Within the hour, the entire prison went into a level 5 lockdown, the strictest form of containment the facility had. All inmates confined, staff movements frozen, and the investigative team, led by veteran officer Dana Ridley, was brought in to examine how something like this could happen under such controlled conditions. Ridley had spent nearly 20 years studying prison security failures throughout the South. She knew that every major breach, every unexplained disappearance, every loophole exploited, usually came down to the same 2 factors, an inside hand or a system that slipped for a moment. But as she walked the length of E Block, she sensed something different, something calculated. Every logbook entry matched the schedule. Every officer on rotation had signed in. No camera feed had interruptions. The cell door showed no forced manipulation. Even the maintenance reports for that section were clean. What bothered her wasn't what they found, but what they didn't find. The first break in the case came 3 hours later, when a guard reviewing hallway camera footage paused at a frame most people would have overlooked. For less than 2 seconds, a light flickered in the reflection of a metal surface, not from the cell, but from behind the camera itself, as if someone had briefly stepped into the blind zone just beneath the lens. Ridley replayed it again. Then again. The reflection was faint but unmistakable, a boot, a pant leg, and the edge of a correctional officer's uniform. Someone with clearance had been inside the blind spot at the exact time Calloway vanished. And that's when Ridley realized something bigger was unfolding, something that reached beyond a single disappearance. Reedsville had seen escapes attempted, but never one that hinted at inside involvement, never one this silent, never one leaving this many questions. But the real shock came when investigators finally accessed Calloway's stored correspondence. Hidden inside one of the envelopes was a coded message, a list of initials, dates, and something that looked like a floor number. One officer read it aloud. Ridley felt her stomach drop, because the final line said, "Everything starts in the basement. Don't let them find it first." What exactly was hidden beneath Reedsville, and who else knew about it, would blow the entire case open. The message found in Calloway's letters hit the investigative team harder than any missing inmate report ever had. Everything starts in the basement. Reedsville's basement wasn't a normal part of the facility. Most new officers didn't even know it existed. It was a relic from the prison's early construction, Old storage rooms, mechanical spaces, outdated electrical tunnels, and records archives sealed off years earlier. Access was strictly controlled, and only a handful of senior staff still carried keys. For investigator Dana Ridley, that was the first real confirmation. This was an inmate acting alone. Someone with internal access had directed Calloway toward a place that should have been unreachable. Someone who knew that the basement could hide more than any cell ever would. Ridley requested clearance to enter the restricted area. The warden, visibly tense, approved it but warned her that the basement was unpredictable. Old wiring, weak foundations. Some parts are unsafe, he reminded her, but his tone suggested more than structural concerns. Ridley sensed his hesitation. She also noticed he avoided eye contact when she mentioned the initials found in the coded message. The investigative team descended the utility stairwell, its metal steps echoing in the silence of the lockdown. Emergency lights flickered overhead, throwing uneven shadows across the concrete walls. Every footstep carried the weight of decades of secrets buried under one of the South's oldest maximum security facilities. At the bottom, the hallway split into 3 paths. The left led to storage, the right toward mechanical rooms. The center hallway, dim, narrow, and marked with peeling paint, led to Records Archive B. Ridley immediately chose the center. Halfway down, they reached the first sign something was very wrong. A lock on the archive door, one that should have been sealed, hung open, not broken, unlocked. And recently, Ridley inspected it. No scratches, no forced entry, which meant someone with a key had been here. Inside the archive, dust coated nearly everything. Shelves of boxed records lined the walls. Old maintenance logs, disciplinary reports, transfer documents. But someone had cleared a path through the dust on the floor. A single trail of footprints, one set going in and no set coming out. Calloway's or someone else's. The deeper they moved into the archive, the stranger things became. A row of boxes had been pulled from their shelves and stacked neatly in the corner, as if someone had been searching for something specific. Ridley opened the top one and froze. Inside were documents from the 1990s, files from a long-closed internal investigation into staff misconduct, abandoned after leadership changes. She recognized some of the initials from the coded message. It wasn't a random list. It was a set of names. Some belonged to former officers, others to inmates long transferred, and at least 2 were still employed at Reedsville. Ridley's pulse quickened. The missing inmate wasn't the core of the case. He was a symptom. The real story lay buried in the prison's past, and someone inside Reedsville didn't want those old events uncovered. Before she could examine another file, Officer Ramirez, stationed near the entrance, called out an alarm. Footsteps echoed from the dark hallway. Not hurried, not panicked, slow, controlled, as if the person approaching already knew they were there. Ridley signaled for her team to stay quiet. The footsteps stopped just beyond the doorway. Then a voice, steady and familiar, spoke through the dim light. I was wondering how long it would take someone to look down here. It was a deputy warden, Marcus Hensley, the man who had first discovered Calloway missing. Ridley stepped forward. "Why are you down here?" she asked. Hensley didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked past her at the open archive boxes, the files that were never supposed to resurface. "You shouldn't be reading those," he finally said. "They'll make everything a lot worse." Ridley kept her voice firm. "What does Calloway know? And why did he disappear from a sealed cell?" Hensley exhaled slowly, his expression tightening. "Calloway didn't escape," he said. "He was taken. And if you keep digging, you're next." Before Ridley could respond, a loud metallic clang shook the hallway. Someone or something had shut the basement door above them. They were no longer alone, and they were no longer free to leave. The metallic clang echoed through the basement like a closing verdict. Dana Ridley didn't flinch, but her team exchanged uneasy glances. The stairwell door above them had been sealed from the outside. Whoever locked it knew exactly where they were and exactly what they had found. Deputy Warden Marcus Hensley didn't look surprised. He stepped past Ridley and faced a dark hallway, his posture rigid, as if waiting for something he knew was coming. Ridley kept her tone steady. Explain. Now. Hensley didn't turn. This prison has two histories, he said quietly. The one written in official records and the one buried in these walls. The second one was never supposed to come back. Ridley folded her arms. Start talking. He hesitated only a moment before finally revealing what had been hidden for decades. Back in the early 1990s, a group of officers at Reedsville had formed an illegal internal network, one that operated outside official oversight. They controlled inmate assignments, manipulated transfers, and hid complaints that could expose them. The initials in Calloway's coded message belonged to people connected to that network. Some had retired, some had left the state, and a few never truly disappeared. They simply blended into higher ranks. Hensley was one of the few who stumbled onto the remnants of their activities when he first joined the administration. He tried to raise concerns, but the documents he gathered mysteriously vanished, and senior leadership warned him to leave the past buried if he valued his career. The basement archives were sealed shortly after. But those names resurfaced, Ridley said, piecing it together. Through Calloway. Hensley nodded. Calloway worked maintenance in E Block years ago. He overheard things he shouldn't have, saw things he couldn't explain. Someone tried to silence him back then, but he survived. Years later, he started keeping notes on what he remembered. He motioned toward the coded message Ridley still held. That was his warning. Who took him? Ridley asked. Hensley finally turned to face her. Someone who doesn't want this old network exposed. Someone still inside the system. Before Ridley could push further, a sharp click echoed from the far end of the hallway. The sound of a door unlocking. A thin slice of white light appeared as it cracked open. Ridley raised her hand to signal silence. The door widened and a single figure stepped out. It was Officer Terrell Judson, one of the longest-serving officers at Reedsville, a man known for his quiet demeanor and spotless incident record. Ridley instantly recognized his initials from the coded message. Judson stood calmly, holding a key ring. "You're not supposed to be down here," he said. Ridley stepped forward. "Where's Derek Calloway?" Judson tilted his head slightly. "Safe. For now." Hensley took a step toward him. "Judson, don't do this." "I'm not doing anything," Judson replied smoothly. "I'm preventing a disaster. Some archives should stay closed. Some stories shouldn't be rewritten by people who weren't here to understand them." Ridley felt a cold realization settle in. Judson didn't speak with the panic of a man caught. He spoke like someone protecting an ideology, one inherited from the network that once operated in the shadows of Reedsville. "He's below us," Judson finally said, "in the sub-level that was never put on blueprints. You won't find it unless I show you, and I won't." Ridley tried to step around him, but Judson backed toward the door, pulling it shut behind him. "Leave the basement," he warned. "Go back upstairs. This investigation is over." But as the door shut, Ridley noticed something he hadn't meant to reveal, a second set of keys swinging from his belt, one marked with a color code for restricted storage rooms, the same rooms where Calloway might be held. Ridley turned to her team. "We're not leaving." Hensley nodded. "Then you'd better move fast. Judson isn't working alone." They rushed down the hallway, following the direction Judson had come from. The emergency lights flickered again, casting long shadows against the concrete. At the end of the corridor, Ridley found a steel door she hadn't seen on any map, a door with fresh scuff marks along the bottom, signs of recent movement. She inserted the key Judson had dropped earlier in his haste. The lock clicked. Ridley exhaled, pushed the door open, and froze. What, or who, waited inside would unravel everything the prison thought it knew about itself. And this time, there would be no shutting the door on the truth. If you thought this story was intense, the next one will shake you even harder. Make sure you're locked in. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.